What if the paranoia you dismiss as irrational fear is actually a chilling premonition? What if the desperate actions of a man fleeing across countries, clutching his life savings and looking over his shoulder at every turn were not the symptoms of a mental breakdown, but the signs of someone hunted by forces we cannot comprehend? Tonight, we uncover the haunting mystery of Blair Adams, a man consumed by terror, whose bizarre journey ended in a violent death under circumstances so strange they defy explanation. From scattered valuables left untouched to cryptic movements across borders, Blair's story is a puzzle that has baffled investigators for nearly 3 decades. Was he running from an invisible enemy, or was his paranoia a cruel trick of his unraveling mind? Stay with us as we delve into the eerie details of this real-life nightmare, a case that will make you question what separates coincidence from conspiracy. Before we dive into this unsettling tale, I have one quick request. Did you know that most of you watching right now aren't subscribed to this channel? If you're fascinated by true stories that reveal the darkest mysteries and expose terrifying truths hidden in plain sight, hit that subscribe button now. By subscribing, you ensure you won't miss any of the chilling content we uncover. Stories that will keep you up at night and make you see the world differently. Now let's begin. But be warned, once you hear Blair Adams' story, it may haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Blair Adams' mysterious death remains one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in modern history. A man consumed by paranoia, fleeing across countries and ultimately meeting a violent end under circumstances that defy explanation. The bizarre details surrounding his murder, his scattered valuables, the absence of a clear motive, and his erratic behavior continue to baffle investigators and fuel speculation nearly 3 decades later. Adams' descent into paranoia began abruptly. In the summer of 1996, friends and family noted a stark change in his demeanor. The once cheerful and optimistic man became agitated and fearful. He confided in those close to him that he believed someone was trying to kill him. Despite these alarming claims, there was no evidence of immediate danger or mental illness. His actions, however, painted a picture of desperation. Withdrawing his life savings, emptying a safety deposit box filled with valuables, and embarking on a chaotic journey across borders. Adams's journey was as erratic as it was inexplicable. After being denied entry into the United States on July 7, 1996, due to carrying a suspicious amount of cash, Blair became increasingly frantic. He begged a friend to help him cross the border, claiming his life was in imminent danger. Despite his panic, he managed to enter the U.S. days later, traveling from Seattle to Washington, D.C., and then driving to Knoxville, Tennessee, a city where he had no known connections. Once in Knoxville, Blair's behavior grew even more unsettling. Surveillance footage from a local motel captured him pacing nervously in the lobby, repeatedly entering and exiting the building as if he were being followed. His erratic movements suggested a man consumed by fear. Hours later, his lifeless body was discovered in a construction site parking lot, surrounded by scattered belongings and valuables. A grim scene that raised more questions than answers. The crime scene was as perplexing as Blair's final days. His body was found partially undressed, with one of his shoes placed under his head like a pillow. Surrounding him were his torn clothes, documents, and thousands of dollars in cash, gold, and jewelry. The absence of theft as a motive only deepened the mystery. The autopsy revealed that Blair died from a blow to the abdomen, which caused fatal internal injuries. Other wounds suggested a violent struggle, but no weapon or fingerprints were found. Investigators were left with a chilling puzzle. Witnesses reported hearing a scream during the early hours of July 11th, but no one saw what happened. Blair's paranoia seemed justified in hindsight, yet the identity of his pursuers, or whether they existed at all, remains unknown. His erratic journey across borders and his tragic end in Knoxville continue to haunt those seeking answers. Theories surrounding Blair Adams's death are as varied as they are unsettling. Some believe he suffered a severe mental health crisis, possibly an undiagnosed psychotic break, which led to his paranoia and erratic behavior. His sudden fear of being hunted and his chaotic movements across countries could be explained by a mind unraveling under the weight of delusions. Yet, those closest to him insisted he had no history of mental illness, leaving this theory incomplete. Others suggest Blair may have been fleeing from a real threat. His claims about men from Germany wanting to harm him could point to a dangerous entanglement abroad. Perhaps he had unknowingly crossed paths with individuals involved in criminal activities or had become privy to information that put him in danger. The lack of evidence at the crime scene, however, makes it impossible to confirm whether his fears were grounded in reality. Another theory posits that Blair may have been the victim of a robbery gone wrong, despite the valuables left untouched at the crime scene. Some speculate that his erratic behavior and visible paranoia could have made him an easy target for opportunistic criminals. However, the sheer amount of cash and jewelry scattered around his body complicates this idea, as it contradicts the typical motives of such crimes. One of the more controversial theories involves the possibility of a sexual encounter that turned violent. Investigators have considered whether Blair might have met someone, possibly a sex worker, on the night of his death, leading to a confrontation that escalated fatally. While this hypothesis aligns with some of the evidence, such as his partially undressed state, it still fails to explain the peculiar placement of his belongings or the absence of any clear witnesses. Adding to the intrigue is Blair's unexplained decision to travel to Knoxville, a place where he had no known connections. Investigators have struggled to determine why he chose this specific city. Some theorize that he may have been lured there under false pretenses, perhaps by someone he trusted or someone who manipulated his growing paranoia. Others suggest that Knoxville was merely a random stop in his frantic attempt to escape an invisible threat. The lack of concrete evidence has left the case shrouded in ambiguity. No fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, and no clear motive have ever surfaced. Even the surveillance footage from the motel, which captured Blair's erratic behavior, offers little clarity. Was he truly being followed, or was his paranoia clouding his perception of reality? The absence of answers only deepens the sense of unease surrounding his final hours. The medical examiner's findings added another layer of mystery. Blair's cause of death, a powerful blow to the stomach, was both unusual and brutal. It suggested a personal attack, one meant to inflict maximum pain rather than a quick death. The absence of defensive wounds raised questions about whether he was ambushed or incapacitated before the fatal blow. Despite the violent nature of his death, no weapon was ever recovered, leaving investigators to speculate on what could have caused such injuries. Adding to the strangeness, Blair's belongings were scattered in a seemingly deliberate manner. His clothes, documents, and valuables were spread out across the scene as if someone had gone through them methodically. Yet, nothing was taken. This chilling detail has led some to believe that his killer may have been sending a message or attempting to stage the scene in a way that would confuse investigators. Whatever the intent, it worked. The crime scene only raised more questions than it answered. One of the most haunting aspects of Blair Adams's case is the psychological toll it continues to take on those who knew him. His friends and family remain tormented by the memory of his sudden transformation from a cheerful, grounded man to someone consumed by fear. They've recounted how he would speak in hushed tones about being followed, his eyes darting nervously as if expecting an attack at any moment. To them, his fear was palpable, even if they couldn't see the source. For investigators, the case is equally frustrating. Despite years of effort and countless leads, they have been unable to piece together a coherent narrative of what happened to Blair in those final days. His erratic travel patterns, unexplained paranoia, and the bizarre circumstances of his death have left even seasoned detectives at a loss. The lack of forensic evidence has turned this case into a chilling reminder of how some mysteries can remain unsolved despite modern investigative tools. Theories about Blair's death have continued to evolve over the years, with amateur sleuths and online forums dissecting every detail of the case. Some have speculated that Blair may have been involved in something illicit without fully realizing it, perhaps unknowingly transporting money or valuables for a criminal organization. This could explain his paranoia and his desperate attempts to flee, as well as the seemingly staged crime scene. However, no evidence has ever surfaced to substantiate this idea. Another chilling possibility is that Blair was targeted by someone he trusted. His erratic behavior in the days leading up to his death suggests he felt unsafe, yet he didn't appear to seek help from authorities or formally report any threats. This has led some to believe that Blair may have known his killer or killers, and that his paranoia stemmed from a betrayal rather than an imagined threat. If true, it would make his final days even more tragic. A man running from danger only to be caught by someone he once relied on. Blair's decision to withdraw his life savings and carry such a large amount of cash, gold, and jewelry has also puzzled investigators. To some, it suggests he was preparing for a long journey or attempting to disappear entirely. Yet his chaotic travel route, crossing borders, changing destinations, and ultimately ending up in Knoxville, contradicts the idea of a well-thought-out plan. It's as though he was improvising at every step, driven by fear rather than logic. The scattered valuables at the crime scene have only deepened the mystery. Why would someone kill Blair but leave behind thousands of dollars in cash and precious metals? Some have suggested that the killer may have been more interested in sending a message than in material gain. Others believe that Blair's death was the result of a spontaneous act of violence, with the valuables left untouched, simply because the killer panicked and fled. Either way, the scene remains one of the most baffling elements of the case. The timeline of Blair's movements in his final days is another aspect that has left investigators scratching their heads. From withdrawing his savings in Canada to purchasing a ticket to Germany, only to cancel it and head to the United States instead, his actions seem erratic and contradictory. His sudden decision to drive to Knoxville, a city where he had no known ties, raises even more questions. Was he running towards something or away from it? Adding to the confusion is Blair's behavior at the Fairfield Inn, where he spent his last night alive. Witnesses described him as visibly agitated, pacing back and forth and repeatedly entering and exiting the lobby. Surveillance footage captured these unsettling moments, but they provide no clear answers. To some, his actions suggest he was being followed or watched. To others, they may indicate the peak of a mental health crisis. Regardless of the cause, Blair's final hours were marked by a palpable sense of dread. The eerie details of Blair's death have turned his case into a magnet for true crime enthusiasts and amateur detectives. Online forums are filled with theories, ranging from the plausible to the bizarre. Some believe Blair stumbled upon a larger conspiracy, possibly involving organized crime or even government entities. Others suggest his paranoia and erratic behavior might have been induced by an external factor, such as drugging or coercion, though toxicology reports found no substances in his system. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case is the lack of closure. For Blair's family, the unanswered questions are a constant source of pain. They've described him as a kind and grounded man who didn't deserve such a violent and senseless death. The mystery surrounding his final days only adds to their grief, as they are left to wonder what truly happened to him, and why no one has been held accountable after nearly 3 decades. One of the few leads in the case came from a security guard working near the construction site where Blair's body was found. The guard reported hearing a scream around 3:30 a.m. on July 11th, describing it as high-pitched and brief. Initially, he believed it was a woman, but investigators later suggested it could have been Blair in his final moments. This chilling detail paints a picture of a violent and chaotic encounter, yet no one else in the area reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. The scream, while significant, ultimately led nowhere. Investigators were unable to determine its exact origin or connect it to any suspects. This lack of corroborating evidence has been a recurring theme in Blair's case. Every potential clue seems to dissolve into ambiguity, leaving behind only fragments of a story that refuses to be pieced together. For those seeking answers, it's as if Blair's death is shrouded in an impenetrable fog. Blair's sudden paranoia and claims of being hunted have led some to question whether he was experiencing a psychotic break or suffering from an undiagnosed mental health condition. While his friends and family insist he had no history of such issues, the rapid deterioration of his behavior suggests something was deeply wrong. His fear of being followed, combined with his erratic travel patterns, paints the picture of a man desperately trying to escape an unseen enemy. Yet, the possibility of a real threat cannot be ignored. Blair's claims about men from Germany returning to harm him could point to a legitimate danger. Investigators have considered whether he may have been involved in something overseas that put him at risk, though they've found no evidence to support this theory. The lack of clarity surrounding his fears has left everyone wondering, was Blair running from a figment of his imagination, or was he truly in danger? Despite the lack of evidence, Blair's case has continued to stir debate among criminologists and true crime enthusiasts. Some argue that his behavior in the days leading up to his death was indicative of someone under extreme stress, possibly due to threats or coercion. Others believe his actions were too erratic to stem from external danger alone, suggesting instead that he was battling an internal psychological crisis. The truth, however, remains elusive. What makes Blair's story particularly haunting is the way it blends elements of paranoia, violence, and mystery. His desperate attempts to flee, coupled with the bizarre circumstances of his death, create a narrative that feels almost cinematic. Yet this is no fiction. It's a real-life tragedy that has left investigators and his loved ones grappling with questions that may never be answered. The case serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly a seemingly ordinary life can spiral into chaos. Blair's erratic travel route remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. After being denied entry into the United States, he didn't give up, but instead found alternative ways to cross the border. His decision to purchase a ticket to Germany, only to cancel it and head south into the U.S., suggests he was acting impulsively, driven by an overwhelming fear. Knoxville, however, stands out as the most inexplicable stop in his journey. A city with no apparent ties to his past or connections to his family. The choice of Knoxville has led some to speculate that Blair may have been lured there. Perhaps he received a phone call or message convincing him that he would find safety in Tennessee. Others wonder if he simply chose it at random, desperate to keep moving and avoid whoever or whatever he believed was chasing him. The absence of any clear link between Blair and Knoxville remains one of the case's most enduring mysteries. The surveillance footage from the Fairfield Inn offers a haunting glimpse into Blair's final hours. His repeated pacing, entering and exiting the lobby, and constant glances over his shoulder suggest a man on edge, consumed by anxiety. To some, his behavior appears to confirm his belief that he was being followed. Yet no one else was seen on the footage, and no witnesses reported seeing anyone suspicious around the motel that night. What's particularly unsettling is the abruptness with which Blair disappeared from view. After leaving the motel lobby for the last time, there are no confirmed sightings of him until his body was discovered hours later. The gap in time has left investigators speculating about what happened during those crucial hours. Did he meet someone, willingly or unwillingly? Was he ambushed as he wandered alone? The lack of answers only deepens the mystery surrounding his tragic end. The autopsy findings, while providing a cause of death, only added to the confusion. The fatal blow to Blair's abdomen was unusual, deliberate and forceful enough to rupture internal organs, yet not immediately fatal. This type of injury suggests a personal and violent confrontation rather than a random attack. The other injuries on his body, including a cut on his forehead, indicate a struggle, but the lack of defensive wounds raises questions about whether he was restrained or caught off guard. Even more perplexing is the absence of any weapon or forensic evidence at the scene. Investigators were left with no fingerprints, no DNA, and no clear indication of what object caused the fatal injuries. The clean nature of the crime scene has led some to theorize that Blair's killer may have been experienced or meticulous in covering their tracks. Others believe the scene's bizarre elements, the scattered belongings, the untouched valuables, point to a chaotic and impulsive act rather than a calculated murder. The scream reported by the security guard remains one of the few auditory clues tied to Blair's death. Heard around 3:30 a.m., it was described as sharp and brief, cutting through the stillness of the night. While initially thought to be a woman's voice, investigators later suggested it could have been Blair himself crying out in his final moments. The timing aligns with when his injuries were likely inflicted, but no one else in the vicinity reported hearing or seeing anything unusual. This solitary scream encapsulates the eerie isolation of Blair's case. It's as though he met his end in a vacuum, surrounded by silence and secrecy. The lack of witnesses or corroborating accounts has turned this detail into a haunting fragment, a sound that hints at violence but offers no clarity. For investigators, it's yet another piece of a puzzle that refuses to fit together. The scattered belongings at the crime scene remain one of its most baffling features. Blair's torn clothes, documents and valuables were strewn across a wide radius as though deliberately placed or thrown in haste. His shoe, positioned beneath his head like a makeshift pillow, adds a chillingly personal touch to the scene. These details have led some to believe that the arrangement was intentional, perhaps meant to send a message or confuse investigators. Others argue that the disarray could have been the result of a violent struggle. If Blair fought back against his attacker, his belongings might have been scattered during the chaos. However, this theory clashes with the lack of defensive wounds on his body. The precise meaning, or lack thereof, behind the scene's peculiarities remains a source of endless speculation, adding yet another layer of mystery to an already perplexing case. Theories about Blair's case often circle back to his paranoia and whether it was rooted in reality or delusion. If his fear of being followed was justified, then who was after him, and why? Some suggest he may have unknowingly become involved in something dangerous, perhaps crossing paths with criminals or uncovering sensitive information. This could explain his erratic behavior and desperate attempts to escape, but no evidence has ever surfaced to confirm such a scenario. On the other hand, if Blair's paranoia stemmed from a mental health crisis, it raises questions about how he managed to function so well for so long before spiraling out of control. His friends and family maintain that he showed no prior signs of instability, making the sudden onset of his fear all the more puzzling. Whether his paranoia was real or imagined, it drove him on a frantic journey that ended in tragedy, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. One of the more unsettling theories involves the possibility that Blair's killer may have been someone he trusted. His paranoia, while extreme, didn't seem to extend to everyone. He sought help from friends and even confided in them about his fears. This raises the chilling question: could someone close to him have betrayed him? If so, it would explain why Blair didn't go to the authorities or take more direct measures to protect himself, instead choosing to flee. This theory is particularly haunting because it implies a level of manipulation or deceit that Blair may not have recognized until it was too late. If his killer was indeed someone he knew, it would mean that Blair's desperate attempts to escape were doomed from the start. The idea of being hunted by a familiar face adds a deeply personal and tragic dimension to an already harrowing case, leaving those who study it with an overwhelming sense of unease. The lack of any clear motive behind Blair's murder is perhaps the most confounding aspect of the case. Robbery was ruled out due to the untouched valuables, and there were no signs of a personal vendetta or pre-existing conflict. This absence of motive has led some to speculate that Blair may have been the victim of a random act of violence, targeted by someone with no connection to him. Yet, even this theory struggles to account for the peculiarities of the crime scene. Another possibility is that Blair's death was the result of a misunderstanding or accidental encounter. Perhaps he crossed paths with someone who misinterpreted his paranoia or erratic behavior as a threat. This could explain the violent nature of his injuries and the chaotic state of his belongings. However, without witnesses or evidence, these ideas remain purely speculative, leaving Blair's final moments shrouded in mystery. The passage of time has done little to bring clarity to Blair Adams' case. Nearly 3 decades later, the questions surrounding his death remain as perplexing as ever. Advances in forensic technology have raised hopes that new evidence might one day emerge. But so far, no breakthroughs have been made. Investigators continue to revisit the case periodically, yet each review seems to lead back to the same dead ends. For Blair's family, the lack of resolution is a wound that refuses to heal. They've spent years grappling with the unanswered questions. What was Blair running from? Why did he end up in Knoxville? And who was responsible for his death? The absence of closure has left them in a state of perpetual grief, haunted by the knowledge that they may never truly understand what happened to him. Theories about Blair's mental state have also sparked debate among experts. Some believe his behavior points to a rare psychological condition, such as delusional disorder, which could explain his intense paranoia and erratic actions. Others argue that his fears may have been triggered by external factors, perhaps a traumatic event or a confrontation that he never disclosed. Without definitive evidence, these theories remain speculative, leaving his mental state as much of a mystery as the circumstances of his death. What makes Blair's case so unnerving is how ordinary his life seemed before everything unraveled. By all accounts, he was a well-liked, stable individual with no history of criminal activity or mental illness. This stark contrast between his normal life and the chaos of his final days has turned his story into a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly and inexplicably things can spiral out of control. It's this unsettling duality that keeps the case alive in the minds of investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. The role of chance in Blair's death cannot be ignored. Some theorists suggest that his arrival in Knoxville may have been purely coincidental, a stop on an aimless journey driven by fear. If this is true, it raises the possibility that his encounter with his killer was equally random, a tragic meeting of 2 strangers under circumstances that spiraled into violence. This theory, while plausible, does little to explain the peculiarities of the crime scene or Blair's scattered belongings. Others believe there may have been a deeper significance to Knoxville, even if Blair himself didn't fully understand it. Perhaps he was drawn there by a vague promise of safety or led by someone who exploited his paranoia. The city's role in his death remains one of the case's most enduring mysteries, a blank space in the narrative that continues to frustrate those seeking answers. Whether Knoxville was a destination or simply a detour, it became the final chapter in Blair Adams's tragic story. Blair's story has become a symbol of unresolved tragedy, a case that lingers in the collective consciousness of true crime enthusiasts and investigators alike. The combination of his sudden paranoia, erratic journey, and violent death creates a narrative that feels almost too strange to be real. Yet for those who knew him, this was no abstract mystery. It was the devastating loss of a loved one, compounded by the agony of unanswered questions. As the years pass, the likelihood of solving Blair Adams' case grows slimmer. Witnesses fade from memory, evidence deteriorates, and leads grow cold. Still, the haunting details of his final days ensure that his story will not be forgotten. Blair's death is a reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life can be, and how some mysteries refuse to yield their secrets, no matter how deeply they are explored. The bizarre details of Blair's death have inspired countless theories, but none have provided definitive answers. Was his paranoia a symptom of an undiagnosed mental illness, or was he truly being pursued by someone with malicious intent? The lack of evidence has left the case open to interpretation, with each theory adding another layer to the mystery. What remains undeniable is the sheer terror Blair must have felt in his final days, a man desperately trying to escape, an invisible threat. Blair's case also serves as a grim reminder of how easily someone can slip through the cracks. Despite his erratic behavior and obvious distress, no one was able to intervene in time to prevent his tragic end. His story raises uncomfortable questions about how society responds to individuals in crisis and whether more could have been done to help him. In the end, Blair Adams's life ended in chaos and uncertainty, leaving behind a legacy defined by unanswered questions and haunting possibilities. As the years have passed, Blair Adams' case has become a haunting example of how some mysteries remain impenetrable despite modern investigative techniques. The scattered clues, his paranoia, erratic movements, and the strange crime scene form a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Each new theory seems to raise more questions than answers, perpetuating the sense of unease that surrounds his story. For those who continue to study the case, Blair's death is a stark reminder of the fragility of certainty. Whether his paranoia was real or imagined, whether his killer was a stranger or someone he trusted, the truth remains agonizingly out of reach. His story lingers not only as an unsolved crime, but as a chilling testament to how quickly life can unravel, leaving behind only fragments of a narrative that may never be fully understood. Blair Adams' case continues to resonate, not just because of its bizarre details, but because of the human tragedy at its core. Behind the theories and speculation was a man who, by all accounts, lived an ordinary and peaceful life before being consumed by fear. His desperate actions in his final days speak to an overwhelming sense of urgency and terror, whether real or imagined. It's this emotional weight that makes his story so haunting. As the mystery persists, Blair's name has become synonymous with unanswered questions and unresolved grief. His case serves as a reminder of the limits of human understanding, even in an age of advanced forensic science. For his family, friends, and those captivated by his story, Blair Adams remains more than a victim. He is a symbol of how easily the threads of a life can be unraveled, leaving behind only silence where answers should be. Blair Adams' case remains a chilling mystery, one that continues to defy explanation even decades later. His sudden paranoia, erratic travel, and the violent circumstances of his death have left investigators and true crime enthusiasts grappling with countless unanswered questions. Despite the efforts of law enforcement and the intrigue it has sparked in the public, no definitive motive or suspect has ever been identified. The scattered clues, his withdrawn savings, the strand of hair clutched in his hand, and the bizarre arrangement of his belongings paint a fragmented picture of his final hours. Whether Blair was fleeing from a real threat or battling an internal crisis remains unknown. What is certain, however, is that his story is a tragic reminder of how some lives are abruptly and inexplicably cut short, leaving behind only echoes of fear and uncertainty. Blair's death stands as one of the most perplexing, unsolved cases in modern history, a story that continues to haunt those who encounter it. The lack of evidence, combined with the eerie details of his final days, has transformed his case into a symbol of unresolved tragedy. For his family, the absence of answers is a constant source of pain, a reminder that closure may never come. As time moves forward, Blair Adams' story serves as a chilling testament to the fragility of life and the mysteries that can surround its end. Whether his paranoia was justified or a product of his mind unraveling, whether his killer was known to him or a stranger, the truth remains elusive. Blair's case is more than just an unsolved crime. It's a haunting puzzle that challenges our understanding of fear, fate, and the unknown. Blair Adams' story leaves us with one haunting question. Was he running from a real threat, or was his paranoia a tragic illusion? What do you think really happened during his final days? Share your theories and thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the world's most chilling mysteries. Your support helps us continue uncovering stories that challenge everything we think we know. And don't stop here. Click on the video appearing on your screen now for another mind-bending case that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm Jack. Stay curious, stay safe. Did you like this conclusion, or would you like me to adjust something? Let me know.